Welcome back to the wild world of iOS programming. Today what we're going to get started with is we're going to do a little bit with core graphics. We're going to start an example today called moving smiles that we're going to continue for quite some time, to be honest. So we'll probably be with this for like 3 or 4 days. So it'd be good if you were able to keep up, because we're going to be doing this one for a while. We're going to use it for core demo, or for core graphics demoing, and also whenever we get to gesture recognizers. So the idea of the moving smiles example is that instead of using an image, we're actually going to be drawing things onto views. We're going to be moving them around. So we'll learn a lot about core graphics. So you can see the things that are drawn in here. And also later with this example, we're going to work more with touches. We're going to work more with advanced touches called gesture recognizers, which are really pretty slick so that we can move these things around on the screen. But the purpose of today is just to introduce core graphics and to see how far we can get into graphics. So some quick facts about core graphics. I prefer to learn skills when we need them for our demo, but some things I'll just kind of mention up front. Core graphics is based on a painter's model. So if you put something on the canvas, and then if you put something over the top of it, it'll be in front of it. If they have an alpha value, they'll blend. Otherwise, it'll just cover what was below it. So this is very different than OpenGL, which uses a depth buffer. So no depth. It's just a painter's model. Very similar to Graphics 2D in Java for people that are familiar with the Graphics 2D paint component calls. There are a lot of similar two-dimensional drawing tools out there in other development environments. This is the really simple development environment that's used by Objective-C. Core graphics, the word core whenever you're talking about frameworks means it's written in C, not Objective-C. I should also mention that you'll hear the word core graphics or you'll hear the word Quartz 2D. It's the same thing. They're talking about the same thing. So core graphics, Quartz 2D, same. The way that you're going to be using core graphics, at least in this class, is you're going to be using it to draw UI views. Turns out core graphics can be used to make PDFs, send things to printers, all sorts of things. We're just going to make it override the draw rect func. So inside draw rect, we're going to be making custom views. What you're going to see as we start to do things is we always will kind of follow these 3 basic steps for most things. Step 1, we'll set graphic state variables, like we'll set what color we're going to use for like the outline and for the fill, also the line width, all sorts of things. We're going to be adding geometry to the current path, so we're going to be adding lines, rectangles, ellipses, arcs, so we're going to be making geometry. And then we're going to say draw the path, so we're going to make a part, we're going to set its color, we're going to draw it. Then we're going to prepare the next thing that's going to go in there and draw it. So for example, we're going to be drawing these smiley faces. So for example, we're going to be drawing a yellow ellipse for the basic face, and then 2 ellipses for the eyes. Then we're going to be doing some stuff with an arc and a straight line for the mouth. And we're actually going to be doing some stuff with gradients. So you can see that we're painting each of these in turn. Each time we're going to set the state, make some geometry, and then draw the path. So let's go ahead and start this demo up. So go ahead and fire up Xcode. Lately what we've been doing is we've kind of been going away from our roots being making universal apps. So today we're going to go back to making universal apps. So we're going to make a new project. The template that we're going to use is the the window-based application, and we're going to pick universal. Let's go ahead and give it a name of Moving Smiles. I've obviously already got one called Moving Smiles, so just like I've done in the past, I'm going to call mine Moving Smiles Video. You can leave off the word video if you like. When it opens up, you can see that with the window-based template, we get a little less than we used to with our view-based applications. So we get our app delegates, for both the iPhone and the iPad. Xcode 4 is going to also give you a superclass app delegate, which I wish we had, but you'll see it when it comes. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to start off by making a view controller. So just go ahead and right click on the word shared, say add new file. We're going to add a CocoaTouch class, UI view controller, and we're going to do something crazy here. We're not going to make a zip file. So you can leave it unchecked. We don't use it. We're not going to use zibs at all in this example. You can choose to target it for the iPad or the iPhone. There's not really a major difference. The biggest difference is whether it allows auto rotation or not. I'm going to leave it unchecked if you want to follow along with me. And this will be my moving smiles view controller. Cool. So we just created a new class. Creating a class is all well and good, but it doesn't do anything until you make instances of the class. So this part is going to be a little review for what we did earlier in the course. For most people, it's probably going to be a very necessary review. What I want to do is I want to, inside view.did_load, let's pull away those guys, and inside view.did_load, what I want to do is I want to set this view to be blue. So I'm going to set the background color to be UI color, blue color. And so in order to check to make sure that I've got all my connections done right, it should pop up with a blue screen. So whenever you run it, you want to make the connections. It's not going to work yet, of course. You eventually want it to pop up, and you know that it'll work when you get a beautiful blue screen. That's when you know things will be good. So I'm not there yet. So let's go ahead and do this. There are a lot of steps that come to that are necessary when you're wiring things up. The quick summary of them is you've got to make some code changes in the header file and implementation file. And then the way we chose to do it is we actually create the object inside the main Windows zip file. And then we've already done these things. We've already made it blue. And the goal is to make it show up with the blue screen. So let's challenge yourself just a little bit. See if you can remember. This is the stuff we did day one in this class. See if you can get a head start on trying to do this. So go ahead and pause the video and see what you can do. We're going to implement it for both the iPad and the iPhone. So go ahead and pause it and see what you can do. Alright, so let's go ahead and do it together. We'll do the iPad one step by step together, and then I'll zoom through the iPhone one. So into the header file, there's a lot of things that we can do. We're going to go ahead, and there are 3 steps. I shorthanded them here to say at class, iVar, and property. What that means is we're going to have to tell the compiler, hey, there's going to be a class called Moving Smiles View Controller. Don't freak out if I make an object of Moving Styles View Controller. So I go ahead and make an iVar. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a property for that iVar. And I'm going to make this property an IB outlet because I'm going to make a connection to it in a zip file. At this point, I could go ahead and connect it in the zip file, but I'm going to go ahead and do my implementation file stuff as well. The implementation file portion is we have to import, synthesize, add the subview, and release. So if I go through those steps, I'm going to have to import this class. Oops, Moving Smiles View Controller. I'm going to have to synthesize this property. And then the most important step is adding the subview. So we're going to say, hey, view, add subview, root view controllers view. Whenever I did this in class, I went way too fast. So I'll try to slow down a little here. You can always pause the video, right? But we imported the class because we're going to need to be able to use it. We synthesized the property, and then making it is one thing, making it visible is another. So by adding its view to the window. That's what makes it visible, so the user can see it. And then, not the most important thing in the world, is you can release it in dealloc. This is more for good habit. This dealloc block would only get called if the program is done. And once it's done, who cares? It'll clean itself up when it's done. So what we did here is we added the code that's going to create a pointer to an IB outlet, and then it's going to take that outlet and add its view to the window. To actually create the object, we're going to go into the iPad main window zip file, and we're going to say we're going to drag over a view controller. This is what actually creates it, so it puts it into the heap. We're going to change its class to be moving smiles view controller. Usually in the past we would have also set its nib file, but we don't have any nib file, so we can skip that step. But what we do need to do is we need to connect it to that outlet we made. So hold down Control and drag from the app delegate to this view controller and connect it to the root view controller. At this point, I should have done all the things that are necessary to make the iPad show up with that blue screen. So that blue screen is how we're going to know that we've got all the connections, and it's actually loading a Smiles view controller. It's a little slow to launch, but you can see I've got a nice blue screen. So now that you saw me do it, see if you can do the iPhone one yourself. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do that. I'll assume you did it like a champ. So let's just go ahead and knock this out real quick. So the one downside of the current system is since the two app delegates are separate, you need to basically type everything twice. Once for the iPhone, once for the iPad. Again, this problem will go away in Xcode 4, which I will welcome. I'm allowed to use Xcode 4, but I'm not allowed to show it to you. That's how the rules go. So I'll just do all these steps extremely quickly. So the things that I did is I made the iVar, I made a property, and then the most important thing was I added the view to the window. So I added all the code. And then after that, I need to actually create this object. You can do the creation of the object in code as well. I'm going to go ahead and choose to do it in the zip file. The only reason I do it this way is because that's how the template chose to do it. And so I thought that was kind of neat that that's how the template does it. So that's the way I always choose to do it as well. Once you've got all your code added, all your connections made, you should see a nice blue screen. Didn't talk through that one quite as well, but it was all in the video if you play it in super slow motion. So that was exciting, but that was old stuff, right? So let's start working towards some newer stuff. So some newer stuff we've been doing is we've been implementing touches. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little section here for my touches. I'm in the moving smiles view controller .m, and what I want to do is I want to add the 4 touches that we're going to be working with. I assume this font is acceptable. I suppose I could make sure it's at 18 at least. Yeah, it's at 18. That's good enough. So the 4 touches that we want to deal with, there is touches began. My autocomplete came up pretty quickly there. Touches moved. Hopefully yours does as well. Touches ended. And last but also least, touches canceled. So we've got finger down, finger moved, finger lifted from the screen, and interrupted by phone call. What we want to do in here is we're going to start off in the touches began area, and what we want to do is on double click add a smiley face. So that's eventually our goal. On a double click we want to add a smiley face. What we can do here is we've got the touches set. The touches set has all of the touches that are in this phase. Since we're only worried about single finger touches, we're just going to grab any object from that set, and we're going to say if any touch has a tap count of 2, so a UI touch has a property called tap count, so it just keeps track of how many taps. It can actually count up to 20 taps. So if anyone has a tap count of 2, what we want to do here is we want to add a view. So I'm going to say add a smiley face at this location. We'll just kind of make sure that things are up and working. And if we double click somewhere, so you can just tap tap, it should say add a smiley face at this location. Tap tap somewhere else. So you can see that the goal is we're going to add smiley faces at those locations. So let's go ahead and create a new class. So right click on the shared, say add new group. We're going to do something new for this class. You've seen it in the book, but you haven't seen it here. We're going to make an Objective-C class that is a subclass of UI view. So we're going to make our own personal UI view, and we're going to call it smiley face. So smiley face is going to be our view that we're going to use. Just like we did before, we're going to just do a real basic thing, and we're going to make the background color be, let's just go with yellow. You'll notice here that instead of saying self.view.background color, which we do in view controllers, we're just going to say self, and this is a view, so self.background color. So we're going to make it yellow just so something shows up so that we know that these things are actually getting added. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to say we're going to create a smiley face object, and I'm just going to call it new smile. And so I'm just going to say Alec init with frame. So what I've got to do here is I've got to create the CG rect that is going to be this new view. Also, before I forget about it, I'm going to go and import the smiley face header. So now the question is, how big do we want to make it? The size that I'd like to make it, I want to make sure it depends on the size of the screen. So let's just go ahead and make a variable called edge length. And we'd like to make something that is based on the bounds width as well as the bounds height. So it doesn't matter how the screen is rotated. So bounds is something we're pretty familiar with. We'll just add the two together, and then we'll divide by some number to make it look about right. I played with it before, and I found that 8 looks about right. So if we take those two, add them together, divide by 8, that's a reasonable looking thing. So for the rect, we're just going to go ahead and make it with the 0, x, and y. We'll set those in the middle, or set those in a minute. And we will make the width the edge length and the height the edge length. This will give us a square, not too shocking. And then for the center, what I really want to set for the center is I just want to set it to the touches location in view self.view. So that'll just center it at wherever the touch is. If you'd like for it to be visible, which is probably a good thing, we need to add the subview to self.view. At this point, the view takes ownership of it, so it bumps its retain count up to 2 at this point. And we are just happy just fine letting the view be in charge of it, and we will just go ahead and release it, and only the view will have a link to it. So let's go ahead and run this thing. Oops, I meant to say self.view.bounds. I'm in the view controller here, so I've got to be talking about the self.views bounds. I was getting ahead of myself with working in the view. So if you run it, you should be able to click, and it should be able to add a yellow square. Also, you should be able to run it on both the iPad and the iPhone. Damn, somehow I lost the word view. Must have had it highlighted and I hit return. And you can see that it makes a view, which is just this yellow background. These will be smiley faces later. And you can see that it adds it at the touch location. Cool. So we've got the blue screen, we added the touches. The notes are just here for your reference later. It's really hard to skim videos, but you can skim notes, and you can remember exactly what we did really quickly, right? So we made it yellow, we added it, and then this is where we're at right now. Cool. So make sure you've got that working. If you have any trouble, go back and get it fixed. We're going to be doing this for days, so there's no reason to get lost to start with. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the actual core graphics part. So we said that's what this whole lecture is about. We've yet to do it, so let's start. So core graphics, most of the work that you will do with core graphics is going to be inside the draw rect func. I'm not worried about those two comments. I'm just going to blow them away. And so this is where you add the drawing code. The first thing that we need, that we're going to spend most of our time with, is we're going to be spending our time with the context. So the first line of most draw rect functions looks like this. You say CG stands for core graphics, context ref. Since it says the word ref, you know it's really a pointer to a CG context. And there is a function, which is actually a UIKit function, that lets you get the current context. Most other development environments slash programming languages that you use will actually pass in the context, like it'll be one of the parameters. I'm not sure why, but Objective-C chose not to do that. But instead you get the context. It is still made for you by the system. You get the context by calling this function. UI graphics get current context. So that's how things start. And then once you've got the context, the pattern is going to be very similar for the first things we do. And that pattern is that we are going to set the graphic state parameters. So things like fill color, stroke color, line width, things like that. Then we're going to add geometry, so we're going to add, an ellipse, maybe a rectangle, maybe a line, maybe an arc, and then we're going to paint it. The way that you paint it, there are a couple different functions you could use, but the one that I like the best is just CG context draw path. The reason I like this one is because it's the most flexible. You can use it with a lot of different modes. The mode that I'm using here is called fill stroke. This means it's going to fill it and stroke it. This will make more sense once we actually start drawing things, right? So this is the pattern that we're going to be using quite a bit. There are a bunch of CG context functions. Probably what I'd recommend you do is you can just hold down Option and double click on Draw Path. And if you click on the document, it'll take you to a document that's called the CG Context Reference. This is where you can see all the different functions that a CG context knows how to do. And there are a bunch of them. So you can manage context. Just reading the categories takes a while. Restoring the state, setting the graphic state parameters. So this is kind of what I do first. Constructing paths, so you can add, lines, points, curves. Painting paths. You can see there are all these little cheater functions. The only one I care about is draw path, so I'm going to always use draw path. And then draw path, you can give it a drawing mode, so you can decide how it's going to get drawn. So all these functions are useful. We're going to use most of these throughout the demos that we're going to do with drawing. And there's some really useful stuff in here. So let's go ahead and start with a fairly simple drawing. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to copy paste from the slides just so you don't have to watch me type. What we're going to do here is we're just going to add a very simple image. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. We're going to add a very simple piece of geometry. We're going to add a circle. So we are going to set some state parameters, as I said that we would, by using some of the special CG context functions. We're going to use the function CG context, set fill color with color. So this is going to set the fill color, and we're going to set the fill color to red. This is a C function. This is not an Objective-C function, or not an Objective-C method. This is a C function. We're going to pass it in the context, and we're going to pass it in a CG color, which is not a UI color. So you can see we make a UI color object, and then from that we say dot CG color. This is a convenience method that gives you the CG color representation, which is what this C function wants. It doesn't want objects, it doesn't know about objects. And then we're going to draw something inside a rectangle that has x10, y10, width 50, height 50. So go ahead and type this in. This is not going to be part of our smile, but I want you to get comfortable with drawing, so we're just going to make a very simple circle. So here you can see that it just adds, it just adds a circle onto this yellow view. It's got X value 1010, that's the upper left hand corner, width of 50, and a height of 50. So it doesn't really look like a smile yet, but you can see that we're drawing. For the first time ever, we're drawing, which is cool. So we've painted something, which is good, and it shows up on the screen. And what we've chosen to do is we've chosen to draw it. There are a couple different options you can use when you draw something. You can say fill it, or stroke it and fill it. So here you can see we said stroke and fill. If we had chosen to just stroke it, then what that would look like is that would just be the outline only. So I changed it to stroke. So you can see there's the stroke that goes around. If instead you changed it to just fill, it would be red circle with no black outline. So you can see there's no pretty black outline. So the one that I like to use a lot is fill stroke. And I think that usually looks the best to have this nice little black outline surrounding the fill color. So that's your basic introduction to drawing. Let's start getting more in depth. So hopefully you got that working. Oh, you can see that since we hard-coded numbers in here, on the iPhone it looks very different than the iPad. I went ahead and did this intentionally. You can see that 10, 10, 50, 50 looks very different on the iPhone. The reason I wanted to do this is, one, because it was simple, and also to point out you very rarely want to hard code values. You almost always want to scale it based on the view's bounds, which is something that you'll do quite often. Next thing I want to talk about is a little sneaky. You probably were not surprised at all that it started drawing from the upper left-hand corner, because that's the way UI views work, that's the way UI Kit works, no surprise at all. It turns out it should have been surprising to you. And the reason it should have been surprising is because Core Graphics behind the scenes is using OpenGL. And OpenGL is a system that has the lower left as 0, 0, with X increasing to the right, as you'd expect, and Y increasing going up. And so what Apple chose to do is they chose to be sneaky. And behind the scenes, on the context, they actually did some transformations to make that happen. And the way they did it is they used these context current transformation matrix changes to you. What you can choose to do, if you would like, sometimes it's easier to draw in the original, y is positive going up context. So what you can do is you can get the current transformation and you can create its inverse, and then you can multiply the two together to get her, and that will get you back the identity matrix. What this code looks like, let's just see if I've got it in the slides here. What this code looks like is it gets the current transformation matrix, and then it uses the current transformation matrix to create an inverse. And then if you concatenate something by its inverse, you get back the identity. So what these three lines of code do is they undo what Apple did. Apple made it to where the upper left was 0, 0, and these three lines of code undo that. And they put you back to the identity matrix, which is kind of interesting. So now if you were to click somewhere, you can see that it's using the lower left as 0, 0. Now for this rectangle, you're defining the lower left corner as 10, 10, and it's got a width of 50 and a height of 50. For what we're doing today, it's going to turn out to be easier to use the identity. So we're going to choose to do this. If you ever want to not use this, just comment out these lines of code. That's very easy. The one thing I will warn you about is if you start dealing with UI touches within this view and you want to use those touches for drawing, you will need to convert those because those do live in upper left as 0, 0. You'll need to do a little point conversion if you need that feature. We don't today. I'm just pointing it out because I don't want to get people in trouble who do my identity flip-flops. So if you do this, it puts things in the lower left as 0, 0. Another thing that is a good habit, it is completely unnecessary here, but it's a good habit, is anytime you start mucking around with the current transformation matrix in a function, it is considered good form to leave it the way you found it. So before I start mucking around with it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function save. G state stands for graphic state, so I'm going to save the context. What it really does is it pushes it onto a stack, a saved matrix stack, and then at the end of the function I'm going to pop it off to restore it back to how it was. In this particular usage, this is totally worthless because this context got made for drawRect, and then after drawRect it goes away. But I wanted to get you in the habit of, if you ever muck with the transformation matrix, make sure you put it back just how you found it before you started mucking with it. It'll be a good habit if you ever start doing more advanced things with sprites. Sprites do all kinds of things with the transformation matrix. So now let's go ahead and start actually drawing a smile. So let's start adding things that will be useful for our smile. So we're going to go and change some of our colors. So for our color, we want to set the fill color to be yellow. We want to set the stroke color to be black, which is great. And then we want to add an ellipse, just like we did before. But instead of making a rectangle, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the bounds. So the bounds are a useful thing. So if we go ahead and run this now, we're going to have an annoying problem. We still got this yellow background, which we don't need anymore. We're past that. So what we'd really like the background to be for the view is the background color. We would like for it to be clear. There's a handy little UI color called Clear Color, and if you do that, it'll add on with a clear background, so you can't see it. It's a clear background. The only thing you can see is your yellow ellipse. If we want it to look a little fancier, we can change this line thickness to make it a little thicker. Catch up the slides a little. So there's the clear color. So we're going to set the line width to be 4.0. So we're going to put that into the graphic state. I'm going to say set GC context, set line width to 4.0. Now if I do that, it'll make the line thicker, but there's a problem that's going to come up. That's going to be a little unfortunate. And that is, if you look really closely at the top, bottom, left, and right, that line thickness started to draw outside the view. And depending on your settings, it might clip it off if it goes outside the view. Apparently the default settings were to clip it, which kind of surprised me the first time I saw it, but it is clipping it. So let's go ahead and make that not happen. So what I want to do here is, instead of drawing to the entire bounds, I want to use the convenient little function that I also wanted to show you this convenient little function. This convenient little function is called cgrect. So it's one that you might have seen back when we were playing with recs a lot. It's called cgrect inset. What it does is it makes a smaller rectangle inside the larger one. And it takes care of all the details, like moving the width, the height, as well as the X and the Y. And it just does all that work for you really easy. So what I did is I made the line width 4, and then I moved it in 2. That should be enough to get a nice clean rectangle, or a nice clean ellipse. Looks like it's clipping on the top, but I don't think it is. Maybe it is by a pixel, but it looks pretty good, right? So at this point we've got smiley faces with a little thicker line. You will have the problem to where on the iPhone the line thickness is a little bit more apparent, but it's some number of pixels, but it's a bigger percentage of the circle here, but it's good enough. So let's go ahead and continue to make improvements. So we made the outside thicker, which was good. And we're making circles pop up everywhere, which is good. Following along, doing good. Let's go ahead and start drawing the eyes next. For the eyes, what we want to do is we're going to make an IVAR. The only reason that we want to make an IVAR is because we're going to do stuff with it later that it's going to be handy to change in multiple places. The IVAR is going to be called _iColor. It is of type UI color. You can see that I chose to use the underscore naming convention. Next we're going to create a property for this UI color. One slick thing you can do if the property is going to have a different name than the IVAR is you can actually stick the property inside an internal category. So what does this mean? This means that we can type the app property, non-atomic retain, UI color, iColor, and by putting it inside a category instead of putting it in the header file, it's made that property be private, which is kind of nice. Because now we get the memory management benefits, but we don't have to open it up to the world. And I thought that is a useful thing, so I think that's the way I'm going to start doing most of my IVARs now. We're going to go ahead and synthesize it by saying the property iColor will make use of the underscore iColor IVAR. And then to be a good memory management citizen, when this thing goes away, release the eye color. Cool. So we've got an iVar ready. We've got properties and all that stuff for it. What I would like to do with the eye color is I would like to set it to a random color. Now the random color, if you just hit Control B, it'll say may not respond to random color. Random color is not part of UI color. It is a category that we've used a lot though. So what I would say is I would say to open up a project where you've used this category in the past. There's a couple places where you can find it. You can find it in the code we've written, which is should be around. We used it in the synchronized spinning, so you can look in synchronized spinning. The other thing is it's also in the book that we use. So it's inside the chapter 12 Quartz fun. And so if you want to, you can open up that project. Ooh, freaking out a little here. And inside that project they had the random color classes. You can just drop those into your project. And I would say copy them in. And then once you import that category, and if you hit build, it'll take away that warning. As a quick reminder for what it is, this category has only one method called random color. And what it does is it just randomly selects a random color, right? Pretty simple. All right, so we've set the eye color to a random color when it's made. Later we're going to change it in multiple places. Time to get to the drawing. So the drawing, just to kind of remind you of the goal. In general, you've got the 3 steps again. So I'm going to go ahead and combine, get rid of some spaces for the 3 steps up here. So those 3 were for the outline. Now for the eyes, what we want to do is we want to set some new parameters. I'm going to set the width, the line width to be 2, just to make it a little smaller. I'm going to set the fill color, instead of setting the fill color to be yellow, I'm going to set it to self.eyeColor. So whatever random color was chosen, that's what we're going to draw with now. Stroke color is still going to be black. If you want to say it again, that's fine, or if you want to delete it, it doesn't matter. It will stay black. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to add an ellipse for each eye. So that's the thing that we've got to do. So I'm going to make a variable called iRect. And so in here, I want to add the geometry to add that eye. To make the geometry for an eye, so this is the stuff that we just added, so add the eye geometry. What we're going to do is we're going to follow this template. So this is a template I grabbed from a different CS class, so I didn't make this image. I think Dave Muchler made this one. Pretty simple smile, 2 eyes, an outline, and then a mouth. The way that this image works is that each eye is exactly 1/4 the radius of the smile. So the whole smile, this is 1/4 the size. The distance is at a 45-degree angle away, where this red line is half of the smile radius. So there's an eye there. And then this one is at 135, and then there's an eye there. And then the mouth we'll get to later, but the mouth is on this circle that's a 0.7 radius, and it goes from -15 degrees, which is here, to -165 degrees, which is over here. So this is going to be the geometry that we're going to use to draw an eye. So that should be enough to let you do this on your own, but since this class is really about programming and not your mastery of geometry, we'll just go ahead and do it together. The first thing that we'd like to do is we'd like to define the eye radius. We'd also like to define the eye x value. as well as the eye's y value, and then we'll put those together to make an eye rect. So these are the things that we want to create, and then we'll add that eye rect to the context. To make our life a little easier, there's a couple variables that are going to be handy. Those variables that are going to be handy, just kind of throughout making this code, is it'd be nice to have a variable that track the smile's radius. The smile radius is just the self.bounds.size.width divided by 2. Then if you wanted to be really accurate, we actually inset it down by 2 pixels as well. So I went ahead and subtracted off those 2 pixels. If you left that off, you'd never know. And then it'd be also nice to have reference to the center point. So the center point is just the width divided by 2 and the height divided by 2. And those are just going to be handy things for us to use throughout our drawing. So you can see how these are based on the size of the view, and then everything we do is going to be based on these two. And this is going to make our drawing a lot easier. So the eye's radius is just 1/4 of the smile radius. The eye's x value is the center point, x, plus a smile radius times the cosine of 45 degrees. All the angles should be in radians. So the x value will be the center dot x plus the length of that red line. So plus the length of that red line times the cosine of 45 degrees. Hopefully geometry is not very intimidating for you. And then we're going to take that whole thing, and that would tell us where the center is, but we don't need the center, we need the lower left corner, so we need to actually subtract off an eye radius. I suppose I could just do it all in one line, but I'll do it in 2 lines, just because I feel like it. Then a very similar game for the y value. We do want, so if we want it to be higher, we're just going to add to it because positive is going up with our current transformation matrix. So that would give us the center, but we don't want the center, we actually want the lower left corner, so that's fairly easy. And now for the radius, for the rect, what we can do is we can make a rectangle with I x value, I y value, and then the width is just the I radius and the I radius. And hopefully what this should do is this should make the eye that will appear on the right side, so the smile's left eye, if we did everything right. We typed a lot of code there, so you're probably going to have to pause it. I type a little fast and get caught up. The first thing you'll notice is that this eye is way too small. What did I do wrong? I did something wrong. What I did wrong was this is the width and this is the height. Width and height are not radius. They are twice the radius. So let's go ahead and make this thing a little bigger. So I just take the radius times 2 to get the width. There we go. So this is his left eye. Looks kind of freaky with only one eye. Doesn't look like an eye at all yet. Making the other eye is surprisingly simple. Once we paint it, it's been painted, right? So we could change the eye rect all we wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the x origin. What I need to do is I need to move it over by cosine of 45 degrees times the length here plus the cosine of 45 degrees times the length there. If you remember what those are, those were, so I'm going to do 2 times, they were half of the smile radius times the cosine of 45 degrees. And then once I have move the origin, I just draw it again, which is surprisingly simple. And then now I have two eyes. You can see that each time I click, it makes the eyes a different color. You can see it looks pretty good for the iPhone. And then also if we switch over to the iPad, you can see that we can add the two eyes on the iPad. There's definitely more to do, but I know that you've had enough. We've kind of hit the time limit for a single video lecture, but we're making good progress. So we've got not only the two eyes, but we're doing drawing for the first time. We've hit you with a ton of stuff, and we've got these freaky little smiles without mouths. So this is a tremendous success. So we're going to go ahead and stop this video lecture here. We're going to come back next time. We're going to pick it up. We're going to do some more drawing. We're going to show you some fancy things with gradients and paths and all sorts of lovely goodiness. Cool. So see you next time.